Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Sisto Says, sponsored by Design 2147, a New York City building and code consulting firm in New York City. Today, I have the honor to be with Mitchell Kurtz, principal of Kostow Greenwood Architects. Mitchell, we go back a long, long time. Thank you for taking time in your busy schedule to join me on the show. You have been a mentor of mine, a mentor of my partner Sergio Giano and Dominic Shinko. We know you for our entire existence here at Design. So it's truly an honor to get you on the show. So thank you for joining me.
Yes, I knew all those guys when I was an intern architect, and I almost knew nothing. So I'm
Well, you
glad to
know a lot now.
I'm glad to have traveled away from that point.
Well, um, just to give a little background about Mitchell and our relationship, I met Mitchell probably 35 years ago, and every time I spoke to Mitchell, it was related to a place of assembly, and we had a lot of projects together where colleges, schools, that we had as clients would have issues with their places of assembly, and there was only one person that I ever recommended, and it was Mitchell Kurtz. And Mitchell would meet me in the field, and we'd walk around Pratt, or we'd walk around Columbia or NYU, and we'd look at these places of assembly, and without hesitation, Mitchell had the entire understanding of how PAs work, from exit lighting to the steps, the size of the steps, the width of the aisles, how you could move the seats around. And it was almost like he had a photographic memory, but he just knew places of assembly. So Mitchell, tell us a little bit about how you got there, because as you said, as an intern architect, you didn't say one day, hey, well, you know what, I'd love to just do places of assembly. You kind of organically grow into it. So tell us a little bit about where it started and how you got to it.
Well, it probably started when I was 10 years old at Camp Wayne for boys, when during the summer I participated in the theater troupe that was there. And then college, I did theater, and I went to graduate school in theater design and technology, and worked in the theater business for about 10 years before I decided my destiny was an architect. So I came to architecture with quite a bunch of knowledge about theater buildings, theater production, a love of theater people, a love for the event. And I realized that as an architect, after I finished my internship and I got my license and I somehow started a business, um, that I actually knew people in the business and I knew something about show business. And it was a natural market opportunity for me. So there I was, and I knew people and they had projects. And
There you go.
so it was a natural outgrowth of that which I participated in before. And what was interesting was, as a theater ally, I'm going to do everything I can to help the creative artists, to help them get the show on. And then you realize, wait a second, I have a license as an architect. I also have a public responsibility.
A hundred
And
percent.
those two things are in tension sometimes.
Sure.
And so, one has to be truthful about all things that are going on all the time, but you don't have to put a ribbon around the worst thing that is occurring. It can
Correct.
be there, you can describe it, you don't have to, set it out. So there's interesting practice techniques that both afford you the opportunity to be the best ally of the producers and the creatives in the theater piece, as well as doing the right thing by protecting the public interest. Because at the end of the day, anybody who came into a theater or a production environment that you're responsible for, you want them going home to see their family at night. That's a
Sure.
very serious responsibility.
Well, and as we know, not only here in New York, but around the world, there have been, terrible, terrible uh, situations where there were too many people in a place of assembly. They can't get out. The fire breaks out. Something happens. So there is a there is a huge responsibility uh, on places of assembly, and the city, uh, they pass most of that responsibility onto the applicant of record, which happens to be you and the owner together.
Yeah,
And I say the owner because we make statements as architects, right, that says, hey, this space based on the laws can only accommodate 130 people. Well, someone's supposed to count and make sure that only 130 people go in there, and if there's more, it's not on the architect, it's on the owner. So there is a lot of responsibility and liability that gets through those. But one of the things that I was always amazed at, that I started the show on, is that when I walked in a space with you, you got both sides of it. You understood the production side of it, that you wanted it to be the best space it could be, but you also wanted it to be the safest place it could be. And that there's a lot of juggle in there, right?
yeah, and
And
there's an educational component to it too. And for clients that there are multi-form spaces that people put on a show and then they change the arrangement of the seating and the staging and they do it again, and we do it 6 times a year,
right,
something like that. And there's an educational part, like, there have to be handrails here, and there have to be contrasting nosing stripes, there have to be aisle lights,
right,
and you find ways within the vocabulary of equipment and experience that each institution or producing entity has, to help them do the right thing.
hmm,
And part of the help them do the right thing also is, before an official inspection occurs, after you get your place of assembly or temporary place of assembly approval of the plans, and before there's a DOB inspection, you go there yourself as the architect, and you
correct. And you
say,
walk
"Well,
around.
let's look at this. Well, this is flimsy. No, we're not
Yeah,
going to do a
this
200
this
pound.
door doesn't have this door doesn't have it's missing a hinge. It's hanging. It doesn't close right. There's the generality, and then there's the maintenance side of it. That it's not just, hey, on the plan it says this is a rated door and this is supposed to close like this. When you get there and you see things that just aren't right,
Yeah, and it's as simple as take the wedges out
right,
from the doors, and
exactly,
can you press the button there? Oh, it doesn't work. Well, let's get that fixed before so the emergency lighting, works. And then carefully counseling people so that they have the temporary sign or the PA sign up, and they have the paperwork, because if the paperwork's
correct. The
not right,
plans,
any inspection goes to hell fast. And if the
correct,
paperwork's right, and you have your theater inspection logbook, it tends to go more smoothly.
of course.
So, part of the practice of working with PA is, we, I don't have a form, but I have a template. So when somebody gets a
Like a
PA or
checklist. Yep.
CPA, they get a 6-page note that said, with bullets, it says, put up the sign, check the emergency lighting, and so it's all part of encouraging good compliance. And, it's not just, those terrible disasters like the Blue Angel fire. By the way,
Hmm.
last December, when we had our first date before we canceled for complicated AV reasons,
Yeah.
it was the 50th anniversary of the Blue Angel
Yes.
fire from 1978.
Correct.
But it's not just, when you look at the history of the Blue Angel fire or Happy Land or the station fire in Rhode Island or the recent one in Switzerland at La Constellation, the
Yep.
Constellation, a lot of it was, there were wiring, there were flammable curtains, there was flammable foam in 2 of them.
Right.
I went to a client's place once, and it was not long after the Rhode Island fire, and they had this egg crate foam. It's also called click foam on an exit passageway. And I said to the facilities guy, "You can't have this kind of foam here." And he says, "Oh no, it's fine." I said, "Well, it could be flammable." He says, "Well, let's check it." He rips off a piece and takes out a lighter. I say, "Wait, wait, wait, not here. Let's go outside and do this." So we go outside and we lit a match to it, and it goes. So it got removed real fast. But and the other thing, they're design things, like for instance in the what's the name of the station fire in Rhode Island, that place had 4 exits,
Mm.
3 of which you couldn't really see from the main occupied space. And
Right.
what we know from human behavior is that people tend to leave the way they came in. If
Right.
there's only one way that people come in, then there's a design responsibility to make sure that all the other exits are visible or made visible.
Well, you you
In the
you
old
bring up
days, you used to go into a theater. Matter of fact, the fire code probably still says it. It says that there should be an announcement and says there's, it's like at the airplanes. There's exits there, and there's exits there, and there's exits behind you, and nobody does that anymore. But there's a responsibility to make sure that if it's not a prominent thing, you make it as prominent as you can. There are no curtains, there's no obstructions, it's not behind an S curve.
right. And it's funny that you you say that, but as an architect, my wife and I go to the theater a lot, and we travel a lot. And when you're in those spaces as an architect, you sit down there and you look. But most people are not looking to know where the exits are. They're creatures of habit. They came in and how many times you go in a theater, and it's funny, my wife will say it to me. She goes, well, we came in on that staircase over there. Why are you trying to go out over there? I go, because it says exit, honey. You can use that. That's why there's a sign over it. But she's so
Well,
used to coming in and out of the
that's
same
the reason
place
that
that that's what she's comfortable with.
well, that's the reason why the 2022 code and the subsequent and the forthcoming existing building code, the EBC, have this notion of a main exit, where the main exit has to be at least 50% of the occupant load. Has to be able to serve at least 50% of the occupant load, and then the remainder have to serve at least 50%. So what's the idea
Because
there? So let's say you have,
the human mind came in that way, and the code is saying, well, they probably want to leave that way, and that makes a lot of
right.
sense.
So before that, let's say you needed four doors. Your main could be one, and your emergencies, the outside ones that you don't use, could be three. And that's not the way it works anymore. And even if the main exit is 100% of the capacity, the other ones, the non-main, still have to be at least 50%. So there's written into the
Better
code now
distribution,
awareness that you need this kind of distribution. And that's
right?
different than the class one, class two, class three distributions. It's in addition to those class distributions, which are only New York City code distributions. The IBC based codes don't have any of that classification.
Correct.
And they don't have
So that's
safe
I
areas
think
or
we've
any of that other apparatus that.
one of our most popular newsletters and one of our most popular podcasts that I've done is the $1 million question. Whenever an architect calls our office, the first question we ask them is, so which code do you want to use? And there's like this whole, there's that exact reaction you just made, Mitchell, which is, I don't know. Well, when was your building built? And when was it built? When was it done? And I think as a young architect, at City College, when I went into the code consulting world with Dominic and Sergio, we were honored and privileged to have people like Conrad back in the day, Levinson, who helped us understand how dynamic New York City was and how many codes there were and how to apply them, because that is the toughest part when you have a city that's been around such a long time. And it's taken us a while, but the truth of the matter is, other than the mechanical, structural, plumbing, fire, alarm, uh, life safety, it's continually changed. But since 1968, on an existing building, um, there haven't really been many changes. And come next year, we're going to have the EBC code for existing building conditions, right? And that code is going to help us integrate our code and IBC together to finally have these revisions. But if you think about it, 1968, 2027, that's a long time without making a lot of changes. So Lauren Babiak of our office was on the committee, and I understand, Mitchell, that you were a big part of especially in the places of assembly, uh, using your expertise to give them suggestions and some guidance. So why don't you share a little bit about that with the our audience? Because I think it's important that if
Right.
you have multiple decades of doing this type of work, that what you've seen, a lot of people probably have never seen. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the back just before we launch into the EBC, the background was that under the 68 code, you, places of assembly, places with 75 or more people for educational, um, social, and entertainment purposes had to have places of assembly and align themselves with a variety of specialized requirements as to the arrangements of stage and audience. And when the 2008 code and the first IBC code came along, there was soon a building department bulletin that Fatma Amir wrote, which said that every existing building had to comply with the 1968 building code for places of assembly. Then, when the administrative codes that were part of the building codes matured a little bit, it said, well, you can elect, you may use the 2022 code or the 68 code, which the building department, just because the way they think about it, understood to be, well, that's the same as Fatma's memo. You must use it, which was really an impediment because
Right.
using the 68 code, I mean, using the 2022 code had real advantages, like if there was an existing stair, instead of getting 120 people out of a 44-inch stair, you got 168 people out of a
That's
44-inch
big.
stair.
It's big.
And it was really helpful. And
Right.
when you even spoke to a commissioner about it, you say, well, I choose, it says I can choose to do this under the code. He says, well, we like to see it the other way. And and the explanation was, well, we don't like you cherry picking, just the favorite parts from the 2022 code in an old code, or let's say a 68 code
Right.
or 38 code building. But the 68 code PA stuff was cherry picking itself because it overlaid 68 stuff on a
And
38 code
30.
building, say,
Right.
and it was already cherry. In any event, the existing building code, the new EBC, really maximizes the advantages of having an old building that doesn't require changes, but you can assess it using the latest standards, which are in all the cases that I have experience with PA related stuff advantageous. It's advantageous for exit capacity, for aisle capacity, for travel distance.
Mm.
Um,
All of
it
the all of the
fails
things that
to do.
all of our struggles are in usually in those three areas.
Yeah, the travel distance one from the 68 code was really a bummer. Matter of fact, when I was a kid architect, I met one time with George Sakona, who was then the borough superintendent. This is probably, oh, I don't know, 1986, something like that. And I think he's doing a recon on travel distance in a PA space. And he says, I was on the committee when we wrote the 68 code, and the consultant that they had doing this was really,
Mm.
really a jerk. And he did this thing with multiple legs and penalties, and we didn't know what it was, but it ended up that way. And it was something, that we've spent 100 hours getting variations and recons on travel
Right.
distance. So travel distance is now in the EBC code for existing buildings is very simple. Primary is 100, secondary is 125. It stops at the exit opening, what the 68 code called an exit opening door, what the 2022 code calls an exit access door, and then it starts again through the safe area until you get to
Right.
a exit discharge
Right. So they
or
broke it down that you go
vertical
from
exit.
one safe zone to another.
Right. And you have a stipulated travel distance before the 2022 code and the EBC came about. The code had a gap. It was silent on what happens once you hit the exit opening
Right.
door. It was unlimited, but when those codes were reconsidered,
They
A
redefined
travel
it.
distance limit was put on that. But there are other things, for instance, that the 2022 code and the EBC miss. The EBC misses it because it points to the 2022 code. For instance, tapered aisles. It's not really addressed. It's kind of addressed with if you have capacity, but they only talk about uniform aisles. So a tapered aisle is missing.
And there's a
And
lot of
basic,
tapered aisles in New York City.
yeah, there sure are. You know, a lot of the old buildings have it. So the EBC allows existing exit facilities to be used. So essentially, the tapered aisles are grandfathered. If you increase the occupant load, you don't have to test it against the, zero point 0.2 inches per person thing measurement, but it'll work out because the zero point 0.2 inches is far better than what the 38 code required. But other things are still missing from the code, which is why a good practitioner will be attentive to good design standards, not just what good minimum code standards are. For
Correct.
instance, when you have
Or interpretations, right? Because you made a really great point. A lot of architects call our office and they speak with Lauren or Tony, and they'll say, "But the code says this," and Tony will say, "Yeah, that's what you think it says, but that's not how they're interpreting it." So, you know, what really prevails is the interpretation at times, and our job is to try to find the consistency in the interpretation. Like you said before, the 68 says you could choose, but well, we don't really interpret it that way. Well, that's a tough pill to swallow when you have thousands of architects working in New York City, and it says you may choose, but when you get there, there is no choice, right? So,
uh,
so how to, you know, no matter, we see it all the time. Um, there is, whenever these changes come, there's a lot of there's there's the human nature as architects to try to do what they're comfortable with and design to what they're used to. So they all try to beat the date, right? Oh, if you file before December 1st, you don't have to do this, right? So everybody runs and then all of a sudden the new code comes and they realize, oh, I only made the travel distance 100. I could have went 150 with the new code, right? Now we end up redesigning anyway because they they were so comfortable in using that code that when the new code comes, there's this hesitation about throwing yourself into it. And one of the ways that you get comfortable with that is people like yourself, people in my office, that the city allows people like you and my team to be part of these committees and understand their thinking and understanding, asking the end user about these things so that when they're implemented, hopefully they don't miss as much as they used to miss. But of course they're going to miss things. That happens in any law. um
yeah,
so but
yeah, I was on the use occupancy and egress committee for the EBC. And it was a good opportunity. Knowing a little something about the theater, I was able to add a couple of ideas that were embraced by the committee. The committee is a large group. It's 20 some people. Fire department's there, the buildings department there, the port authority is there, the
right,
board of
everybody's there.
education is
Yep.
there. I mean, it's a big group with a lot of diverging interests, and so to find common interest is hard, and it's all developed by consensus. If any one person objects, it's going to go through some appeal level, which everybody wanted to avoid. So there's a real incentive to form a consensus and to dull the sharp edges. Um, so among the things just let me step back half a sec, which is that the EBC is going to be an architect's friend. It is better than having to constantly go for $1,000
Reconsideration. Yeah.
CCP ones
uh,
all the time. I mean, it makes the basic concepts are like an existing building, if it's lawfully occupied, either through SEVO or approved plans, the existing egress is okay. And then when you do something new, if you're not increasing the occupant loads, then you can change an the occupancy group classification. You can change how a space is used, and you can make use of the existing egress without having to redo the entire egress scheme, and that's very advantageous.
that and that has been, sometimes in our office, as you know, Mitchell, we've done these together, that you change something really simple and it costs the owner an enormous amount of time and money to go through the entire process for, you know, 10 occupants, you know, and because now you got to file an alt one or you got to file an alt C of O, and it just
Yeah.
continues
So
to pile on.
yeah, so this is the places of assembly piece, which is in, for those people with a pencil and pad, 305.5.18, is very easy to read and readily understandable. Um, if you're doing a production in a place of assembly, rearranging the seating and the staging, let's say you have a one-story building and you're rearranging all it, well, using the work area criteria in the EBC, that would be 100% of the work area. So it's suddenly a level two, which is the more advanced um,
Type of filing.
requirements. Well, the EBC defines all changes of platforms, stage, and seating, provided no other alterations have been done, as level one. So that's a great boon. So level one means the work you do has to conform to the EBC, which is essentially the 2022 code, but nothing else, which is great. You don't have to go back and dig around the egress or dig around other facilities in the building. You don't have to change the plumbing or any of that stuff. So that's really good. And then for special occupancy structures, pretty much the same thing applies. You still don't need a place of assembly in a special occupancy structure, so that 1982 Fruchtman memo is going to be obsolete, but the same content of it is now
In the code.
memorialized in the EBC.
Right.
Um, and it allows work to be done in the space. That work needs to be complying with the current code, but other parts of the building can be used and measured against 2022 code criteria. So you have old exit doors and you can still use the zero point 0.2 inches per person standard on it. Same thing with aisles. Steps get to zero
So
point
it
0.3.
sounds like there's a lot more flexibility, and when I say flexibility, meaning that it's not you got to rip everything out and basically start from a fresh space. You can use what you have and try to implement it and put it into this criteria now in the 2022 code that
Right.
allows you to maintain a lot of it without really. A lot of the theaters are so beautiful that you really don't want to disturb them. They just, and they have something eclectic about them, whether they're on Broadway or they're in Pratt's, at Pratt Institute in one of their Ryerson buildings, or it's at, some high school in New York City. Some of them have some incredible architecture to them, and that the code shouldn't influence the aesthetics of it. It should influence the safety of it. And I think it sounds like they've done a pretty good job with that, Mitchell. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and basically, when you want to set up a new PA in an existing building, it asks you to do, I think it's five things. That the finishes should be complying with current standards, handrails and guards should be,
Sure.
um, that the means of egress work, and that what you're doing is accessible. And
Correct.
there's a new thing there, which is that one of the architect investigations that's required by the EBC. There's architectural investigations, there are other structural investigations that are required, but for PAs, there's a special requirement for an architect to basically inspect the entire means of egress route from the place of assembly out to the
All
street.
the way.
And if
Oh,
there's
makes sense.
something happening there that needs correction, you're responsible to correct it or get the landlord to correct it. But you got to make note of it, and it has to then be corrected. And I think that's smart, because any responsible architect would not have just stopped at the doors. You would walk the whole path and say, you know, get this storage stuff out of the
We
corridor.
we
And
we just we just did that. We just did that at a place of assembly for a school, where it was just a paperwork change for the number of occupants, and the applicant said, "Sister, I understand it, but I need to go." And he went and he walked it, and he found things that the maintenance department did not take care of, and they cleaned it up immediately. He said, "Look, I know it's only a piece of paper for me to say there's not 375 people here anymore based on these layouts, but there's more to it than just that piece of paper." And you make a valid point, and I'm glad that they put that into the code. So Mitchell, I know I could talk to you all day about this stuff because it's always been something we've worked on together, as our team and your team. Um, but at the end of the show, I always have a saying. A good friend of mine always said, he was in the estimating world. His name is Andrew Peters, and he would say that he would always look. He had to look behind him to get some information, but the idea was always to look through the windshield. The rear view mirror was this big, but the windshield is that big. So as we go forward and seeing decades and decades of places of assemblies, what are you excited about with, I know you've touched on certain pieces, but give me like your favorite part now about the 2022 EBC code for places of assembly. What would you say is the biggest highlight for you as an architect?
Um, I think the ability to use an existing space without having to fight its character or its constraints, but they're accepted if it's the legally occupied condition, is
Exactly.
is really greatly advantageous. And you know, I think diving into it, I always think of codes as similar to like a carpenter. Open up your toolbox, and what do you have? You have design knowledge, you have knowledge about people, you have knowledge about materials, and you have the code there. All these tools you use to create something. So rather
Right.
than understand the code as an impediment or oh my god,
Yeah.
I think you
You
see it,
embrace it.
you embrace it and see it as a creative tool because it can get you what you want. And the fact that the EBC embraces many of the 2022 code provisions is really quite nice. I mean, handrails and guardrails can be adjusted to a lower height for sightline purposes. That didn't exist before the 2022, and that's built into here. The idea that a guardrail on the end of a seating bank can be the handrail, so you don't need two, like in a stair where you need a guardrail and a handrail.
Right.
And that's really advantageous. The elimination of the prohibition of that a cross aisle can't be within 12 feet of the stage
Right. Yeah.
is gone, and that was always a real problem, and thankfully kind of ignored, but it was still on the
Yeah.
books. Um, you know, there are a lot of things there that make it easier to practice and to support the architects supporting the artists in the theater that I think is very helpful.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to thank you. We've tried this several times, but we finally made it work, Mitchell, and I appreciate you taking time out on your busy schedule. You're a world of knowledge. Anybody who watches our show, if you have any problems with your places of assembly, whether they're theaters, whether they're restaurants, whether they're education facilities, Mitchell is the man, and we've always respected him in that way, and so has many other people throughout New York City in their industry. So, Mitchell, you are an icon. I thank you, and look forward to still working with you and keeping it going.
All right, sister, keep your calls coming.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, we'll see you.
Take care.